Are you ready, Andy?
Yes. It's funny when we're off air. First question we ask one another: "You ready?" And the
We
answer is
always say
always
no.
no. We are on today with Juliet Reynolds,
Juliet Reynolds,
who is dying to get on the show. She's been asking me for months, "Can I get on? Can I get on? Can I get on?"
please.
Yes.
Give me spotlight. Give me
You
spotlight.
can see it from the first moment she joins us. Obviously, that isn't the case. She's going to come and talk to us about a subject she knows a lot and nothing about: double standards. How, in her 25 years in the workplace and just in life in general, has she been experiencing things that you and I may not be picking up on?
Yeah.
So I'm really curious that just what is it when she brings our attention to it, we'll actually be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to find out a few things.
And where are we going to do that, Mr.
We're
Shalef?
doing that and so much more, Bambos, on A Wonderful Chaos.
This is a very interesting subject.
It is.
I was walking on the streets yesterday with Anna.
Okay.
Anna is the one that I'm seeing. And she told me when she's walking and there's a man coming towards her, she's the one that normally moves. So that, and he just, and I'm like, really? So we tested it, but and then she said, because I'm next to her, everyone's like navigating left and right of us. I'm like, interesting. So today she experimented. And she says the guy was gonna like walk over her if she didn't take a left or right.
Wow.
And that was really interesting to it heightened my awareness. Like now when I'm walking, I'm like, oh, there's a woman coming towards me, and I'm aware of I walk really straight.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's there's of course at the moment everyone is always talking about gender equality and LGBTQ and all the shows we're doing, and
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, that is as well, of course. And what I really find interesting, and what I would love to see how we frame discussions, is that we build consciousness that we're not necessarily, we become more conscious of things we're not aware of. And the reason why I phrase it that way is because I notice when it comes with shame and guilt that all of a sudden it pushes people away. And I'm always trying to invite people to become more aware.
Yeah.
And in that world, I just see there's nothing to defend, because if we did something a certain way for the last 40 years or longer and it was absurd, then why don't we just alter it because it makes sense now? And it's so easy in that space to grow and adapt, where I see more of the behavior being, hey, why are you doing that? That's against us. So it's a very negative reaction. And it does have an impact. So we can't deny that it also has an impact, but it also alienates. So,
I'm curious, when you started talking,
Yeah.
what give me some context, because I feel confused.
Oh, interesting. The reason was because when we interact with Juliet today, that my joy is actually hearing areas where you and I may not be conscious that there's behavior that we have that is
as men
or as people
Yeah.
that are men that are that's biased. I'm sure that there's women that have biases against women as well. We see that as well in studies that are done.
Yeah.
So it's not one-sided. So yeah, but I love seeing areas where I actually took something for granted, and then I realized that I'd never realized that I did take it for granted. There's something beautiful in that. Yeah.
Iris Sofer says totally different experience when I walk alone and when I walk with a guy. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really new for me. It's definitely heightened my awareness when I'm walking on the streets. And Bulelang from South Africa says, Bambo, she's correct. White males are also like that. They want other races to give way to them and get annoyed when you're aware of it and don't move.
Oh, wow.
Wow, Bulelang.
Wow, Boalong. So Boalong, for those that don't know, is in South Africa. So you also have the whole history of apartheid. So so you'd still experience it in I mean, it's interesting. I would say in America, because especially the white people are more scared, I believe. So they would move out of the way, but they would be moving out of the way not necessarily because they're conscious and trying to make space for another person, but they're just like
Fear,
anxious and fearful.
automatic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think with that, it would be nice to bring Juliet on.
Let's do it.
Professor of 5 books on the topic of how women are treated differently in the workplace. Can you tell us how how does it feel to be invited onto a show on a subject that really is not of anything you really do in your life? That's the first question I have for you.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Very strange. I mean, I can give you examples, and I totally agree with what Bambos was saying, a minute ago, that if I'm walking down the street, it's always me that moves, unless I'm with somebody else, and that's not just men though. In like the double standard thing, you get the old adage, if you like, where the older generation would say, "Oh, the youth of today, they're so rude, they're so this, they're so that." Yet so many times you'll get a group of older people standing in the middle of the pavement and they don't move. And you've got to go around them. And from experience with pushchairs, with kids, sometimes out in the road, because even when you stand and say, "Excuse me," they don't move.
But would you
So
see that
just
as
that.
do you see that as age specific, or you see that also with a group of older men as well?
You would see it as a mixture, but
Mm.
it just made me, from that point of view, it was the fact that they would typically be standing there looking at you like,
Yeah.
you're just a young mother. What do you know about anything?
Wow.
Well,
Um,
Juliet, you know what happens now though? Since COVID came, as I'm walking on the street, people actually make space for you.
yes.
And I was like, oh
Oh,
wow, people are so nice.
Yeah.
people
I had
will
a
actually cross the road
So,
to avoid
so
you now.
you work in the corporate world because I actually don't know much about you. That's right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, I do now. Yes. I've done many different things. I've kind of gone from corporate to helping my ex-husband run a business, um, and then back into the corporate world. Yeah.
So I recently photographed a high-end criminal lawyer, and she's in a position like it's like partnership in a company, and when they have a meeting, she's expected to get the tea.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
I completely get that.
Do you still see
Completely
that? Do
get
you
that.
have that experience still to today?
To be fair, in the company that I work for, not in general. Everybody gets their own tea and coffee. It's not, years ago, there were 22 of us in an office in Reading, and if tea and coffee was being made, it was me that was making it.
Even
To
though
the
you
point
might
where
be
I
in a
actually, I was at that point, I was the general admin. I wasn't a director or anything like that. But by the same token, they were all more than capable of making a cup of tea or coffee, right?
Yeah.
Um, and if I was in the middle of invoicing or making calls, because I still had to make customer calls, and I used to do the payment chasing when people hadn't, companies hadn't paid maintenance or whatever. So it wasn't like this was just, I was just there to make the tea and coffee. I had a role to perform.
Yeah.
But yes, it was still expected that I would make the tea and coffee.
but it was unspoken expected.
Oh no, it was pretty much spoken actually. It started off as unspoken, and I suppose in some ways I made a rod for my own back. But then it was like, "Oh, Jew, can we get a cup of tea?
Oh,
Make us a
wow.
coffee." So yeah, it was definitely expected
Mm.
And
without it being part of my job role.
and let's assume you wouldn't do it. How do you like what would how do you think it would evolve? Would you be labeled as difficult?
Oh, probably, because moving on to now, um, or more recently, um, not with tea and coffee, but with other things that aren't typically part of my role. There are people who don't want to do a certain thing, so they'll ask me to do it. And because I tend to try and be helpful, I will do that thing. But then there might be another time where they ask me to do it again, and I'm like, I'm really sorry, I don't have the time. I'm really
Mm.
slammed. You just need to do this. And I have been labeled as unhelpful.
Yeah.
So, and it's, like, okay, I
Mm.
don't, I'm actually doing something that A, you are more than capable of doing, and B, uh, there's no reason why you wouldn't be doing it. You're
Yeah.
asking me, to give you a background, I am an EA. I look after senior leadership team within the company that I work for. But this is other people in their teams who think that because I am a secretary,
Yeah.
I will just do what they want, what they don't want to do,
Yeah.
as opposed to things that are actually important. They don't see my role as important, I think, is
Mm.
probably quite a good way of putting it. There are a lot of people who do, don't get me wrong.
Mm.
It's a lovely company to work for, but there are some people that you think, okay.
You know what?
And
One
that's
of
and
the
that's not just now, it's across the
No.
board.
One of the hardest things for me in my working experience when it came to situations like this, and we went through part of our journeys together. We worked together for the same company in different locations for 10 years.
Yeah.
Um, I had moments where I saw that the executive assistant roles were doing a good percentage of the work of the actual person that was in the role themselves,
Mhm,
but they would never necessarily be acknowledged, but it would always, or if they were, it was done kind of more in a condescending way.
mhm,
And it would always be hard for me because sitting it, like I could see through this, and I would always be looking, thinking to myself, okay, there are these highly effective people, and yet they're not getting the higher level roles because, funnily enough, they would also look at the kind of almost the imposter of the people that they were actually, and they'd never want to be that person.
mhm.
So they'd
Yeah,
almost never, they wouldn't advance because they're like, I don't want to do his job. Or, it was often the male that was in those roles, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, nowadays you do get far more male EAs, which,
Yeah.
I suppose that's me, not as a double standard, but as a that surprises me that there are men out there that go into that role. So that's me coming at it from a different point of view. I'm always quite shocked to come up against a male in that role. To
Oh,
like,
wow.
um, it still surprises me. I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Do
Um,
you feel like that they're treated differently as they're a male?
I don't. I think that there's kind of two different aspects to that. It's I don't think they're treated differently from a normal EA. And I think if somebody's going to treat an EA in a disrespectful way, they'll do it whether they're male or female. Um, but yeah, as a male, do you get treated differently?
I have a
I don't know.
prejudice. When I ask you the question, I have a prejudice. And not me, but I have a belief. I want to air my belief.
Okay.
My belief is that when a man or a woman are in the same position in a company, they look for more of what's the trajectory for the man more so than
Hmm.
for the woman.
Hmm.
So they'll think about what's the career development for this individual. And for some reason, I think it's just a bias that
Yeah.
there's a thought like, if we want to get him, we got to make sure that he evolves in the company. Like
Hmm.
that's a feeling that I think is so embedded, and people are unaware that they do it just by nature.
I mean, that takes me right back to when I first started work. Many, many years ago. And because I actually worked in a building society, like an independent bank. If you don't have them over there, um, you don't get many anymore. But it was all about finance, and two of us were taken on at the same time. Me and a guy, same age, same kind of backgrounds, everything. And from the get go, I was taught to work on the counter. So just taking people's money, giving people their money back. Um, and he was taught about the mortgages side and the investment side and the da 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 da. And when I asked why, because he's more likely to take it in. Now, this was like week 1 or 2. I'm not talking about 6
I got
months
it.
and I was just like airy fairy. I'm talking about, you know,
Because
the
he's
fact
more
that
likely
because
to
he
take it
was
in.
male and we had a male general manager and we had a male director, there were 2 women on the board. Um, uh, and they were great. I actually knew one of them through my mother, who worked for a firm of solicitors. Um, and so she was always really nice, and
Mm,
there was another solicitor again that I knew through my mother. But one of them was a local businessman. So and he owned the local nightclub. Now, as well as working in the building society, I was working in a pub on Friday and Saturday nights, and we used to after the pub closed go to this nightclub. So I knew this guy really well, um, and he was a member of the board. And the first time he walked in, um, they're all like, you're like this because they're members of the board. And he walked in. He's like, "All right, Juliet, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, all right, Ron, how are you? Haven't
mm,
seen you in a while." Da da da.
yeah.
I got so much trouble. So much trouble. You can't speak to him like that. Sorry? He's my friend. I've
Yeah.
known him longer than I've known any of you.
Mm. This speaks to another point, which is beyond just having more women in the workplace. So the one thing I've seen is that we're not only talking about getting and equalizing that, but the dominance of the male behavior, which is considered normal, means that for females that want to say be in that environment, the thing I've seen is that they have to adapt to become more male in how they operate. Is that something that you would say you can identify with, or?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the 2 sides to that. Sorry if that's tinging. I can't turn it off. I've got, 2 sides to that, in that you've got women who become very male-like. But then you've also got the side of it that if you stand up for yourself as a woman, you're seen as a bitch, the
Yeah,
ballbuster, you're arrogant, you so
You're not
either
playing.
way, you don't get to be seen as a strong woman. You get to be seen as um somebody who's just causing trouble,
yeah.
or
You're not a team
um
player.
no,
Yeah, it's almost like
exactly.
if you're confident and strong if you're a male, and you're a bitch if you're a woman.
Yes.
Like that's kind of the dichotomy. The
Yeah.
same behavior, it's just viewed through the lens differently.
Yeah. And
I
I
mean,
ca- and I and again, I can't say that I am um innocent in seeing that about other women.
mm,
Um there are those that I'm just like, you're just rude.
yeah.
Mm.
And maybe they see themselves as standing up for themselves, but I see them as rude. And would I do that if it was a male? Probably. Probably. But it's a very cloudy subject.
Mm,
Can you be feminine and still be a strong woman? And if you're feminine, are they just going to walk all over you?
Mm.
yeah.
Um, whether male or female. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on the role that you're in. Um, or the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
Mm,
The same things can happen outside of the workplace that happen in it, but just in for different reasons.
Mm. I had this. You took me back a little bit when I worked in a cosmetic company. So there were a lot of women there, and we had the owner. And the owner would talk to me, like he would always shout. And when he would shout, that was his way of communicating. I could take him because I just saw that that's his father talking to him, and that's how he
Uh-huh.
dealt with people. But when he would shout at women, I saw there was the same tone, but there was also an undercurrent of talking down to.
Mm-hmm.
And I always would feel confused when my colleagues would get over emotional, and I really had to like what's happening for you? Like he shouts at me too. He's like, no, Bumbo. When he shouts at me, he's really condescending and talking down at me. And with you, he shouts, but there's a kind of respect towards you.
Okay.
It was really subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean there are those differences. There definitely are those differences.
This woman, I think it's a woman, Chris with a C. That's another a form of what do we call it? Bias. If I see a C, then I assume it's a female. But that's because some women in power can be extremely nasty and catty.
Well, absolutely.
So it's so funny because when he wrote it, I'm like, yeah, he's right. Like, but the funny thing is if a woman is nasty and catty, I see that in the society we treat them as less than when a guy is just a dick and an asshole. Like it's sort of like we accept it in a weird way. Like, oh, this is just him being strong, getting things done, and she's just being difficult and whatever the
Frustrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Condescending. It must be that time of the month. Like phrases that kind of demean the individual instead of respecting that they're also just that's their way of being, right?
Julia, I'd love to hear more about things that me and Andy as men might be missing.
Yeah.
Be missing. It's just such a difficult, because I don't know Bambos. I don't know you personally, Andy.
I can tell you, Bambos, when I call her, I think every time, what's the most offensive thing I can say? So it's interesting because with probably any other individual to ask that question to, it would be different. But we have a friendship that goes beyond words.
Yeah. This is true. This is true. It does make it very difficult because I am not I notice things. I notice those double standards and they annoy me, but I'm not one to kind of keep hold of everything in that respect, because and this is where I go wrong, is that I just kind of accept it. Yeah. So, that's my failing. That's me not going, sorry, you did that. Why? Or, but I don't even really think that it's just men. I really do think it's people. Double standards are across the board, and I think that we all do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it when I'm driving. I'll tell somebody off, in my head or out loud in my car for something that they've done, and then a few days later catch myself doing it, maybe not indicating on a right turn or
And what are you saying? Your assumption is that they're a woman? Is that what you're saying, or what's your point?
No. My point is that we all do those double standard things.
She's naming that she'll see someone doing it and then she does it herself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but I try not to do that in the being offensive way. So if somebody is truly offensive to or offends me, I try not to do it back.
Yeah.
But men, it's the standard things, isn't it? Men will always talk about women drivers.
Yeah.
Some of the worst drivers I know are men.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So, totally. But again, when men and women are working together, and Andy, you and I have had this discussion before, when my ex and I were running our own business, he would still treat me as the secretary.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest double standard, because actually when we went into that business, I knew more about it than he did. So it's don't just assume that you know more than a woman.
Yeah, but I would argue something also in reverse, is that it wasn't till after you separated where I saw you stand in your full strength.
Yeah, true.
So
True.
in a weird way, I would say, yes, in some ways you could say he didn't treat you that way. And I would even suggest you didn't treat yourself the way until I saw you afterwards as well.
No, you're right. I didn't.
Yeah.
And
And I want to celebrate it because it was beautiful to see. So I don't want to make a point. I want to say thank you for showing me a part of you, which was scary as hell from an outsider to see you going into the world with such clarity and strength, and me on the sidelines saying, "Oh shit, how's she going to do this?"
I did okay.
You
I
did
think I did
great, actually. You did fantastic, which is really, really wonderful to see.
I love how you change your voice and
Well, it was true. I mean, if I just speak to this for a moment, she was in a rough situation. She decided exactly how she wanted to separate. It was done reasonably. These two weren't hating on one another. It was just not going to work out. But she took drastic measures, which made me have to gulp and swallow and say, okay, she's really going for it. She lived the way you do. I don't necessarily want to go into details because that's not my prerogative to share, but she basically put it all on the line, into the point where she didn't necessarily know where am I going to sleep kind of line, but I'm going to do this regardless. And that there's a respect I have for that. And you know how it is with me. If you really go for it in life, and you don't have, you're not guaranteed of anything in that world, and you make it through it, it builds such character because that's where you learn about yourself. So
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Juliet.
Dziękuję.
Have you had moments in your life, Juliet, like you as a woman, where it did impact you, the way you were spoken to or the way you were treated? And it doesn't have to be in the workplace, by the way, just in general. And it really hit you in a way, and maybe you saw it later on, that how it impacted.
This kind of goes back to what Andy was saying about me not standing up for myself at the right times. And I've done that a lot in the past. So one of those, which kind of relates to double standard thing as well, was previous partner to the last one we were talking about. I was very controlled by him, or I allowed myself to be controlled by him, as Andy would tell me. I allowed myself to be controlled by him. And he was off doing things and then shutting me down for having relationships outside of our circle. And I don't, I just mean friendships.
Would you say there was no trust?
He had no trust, no.
Yeah.
And I gradually learned to have no trust, because there was it was just stuff. And the impact that had on me was for quite a long time not trusting anyone.
Wow.
I didn't trust what anybody told me. I didn't trust, and especially people that knew him. And that, to a certain extent, even includes Andy.
You didn't trust me.
Not that I didn't trust you, but I probably wouldn't have told you anything that I was worried would get back to him.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, and that took an awful.
But we're talking about, I mean, we don't go into details on the show, but we're talking about a very unhealthy relationship. And so even in this case, it would be hard to call this a double standard. It was like you were just in a train wreck of a relationship.
Yeah.
They make bad, telenovelas that aren't as bad as what happened in that relationship. So True. Yes. And the irony,
a telenovela?
The telenovela is like where they try to make the most absurd storylines. And I'd love to talk about that story, but I'm not going to, because I don't think it's proper to discuss it if it doesn't come from your mouth. But I do want to say at least one point. It's fascinating that the distrust that he showed towards you was actually the distrust that he exhibited in his own life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
nothing to do with you.
no,
Nothing to do
exactly
with
the
me.
things that he said and did. And so the greatest hypocrisy in the world you could imagine is what was exhibited in her life. So I can understand why it was so hard for you to recover. And I apologize to our audio engineer because he always tells me, Andy, don't talk about things you can't discuss on air. So Cass Midgley, I'm so sorry. I love you. I apologize.
Cass Midgley, I'm happy it wasn't me this time.
He calls it inside baseball. He says, Andy, no inside baseball. Don't talk about things that no one else understands. So please.
Yeah. So also I photograph, most of my clients as a photographer are women, and it's normally women who I would say are in positions or they're business owners and they want really good pictures of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've discovered is sometimes a woman will give up her career to follow something a little bit more playful in her life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And if she would have it both ways, she would want to keep both.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I recently photographed a criminal lawyer who is also a burlesque dancer who we won't name. And she's holding both polarities, but she finds sometimes she has to give up the law, the criminal law,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes over her femininity where she feels
Suffocated.
Restricted, yeah.
And then she'll go into her feminine and do burlesque shows, and she's really good at it. She's really amazing. She like shines. But she's also a person who has high intellect and wants to also be that too. And
Yeah.
so now she's back in the law environment, and she said to me, Bambos, you don't understand. Normally women like me will quit the law firm and I'll become a coach to support women in that role on how to.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to do that anymore. I'm saying I want to keep both polarities, and the moment I do that, it's a risk. I'll be seen a certain way. I could lose my job. So in no way will if a colleague sees my performances, I'll be labeled a slut. I'll be labeled this and that, and like it just broke my heart. I felt so emotional at that injustice. And it's not only women; it's also people of color. Any kind of perceived minority that's not a white privilege.
But it's not even just that. I
Oh,
mean,
tell me.
well, okay. So Andy said earlier he likes to think of the most offensive thing he can say to me when he greets me. And one of the things that we've discussed on many occasions is I have 5 children, 3 different partners.
Yeah.
And I'm judged for that.
You're judged horribly for that, by the way.
I'm judged horribly for that.
Can you help me understand what that looks like?
Well, so I have a son from my first marriage, 3 children from the next relationship, 1 daughter from my last relationship, and they were all long-term relationships. They weren't, let's just go out and have another baby. So as far as I'm concerned, I have longer relationships, than some normal marriages last, and guys don't get judged on it. And you can see it. Peter and I, so we're getting married next month, have both been married twice before, right? This is the 3rd time for both of us.
Wow.
But the faces when I say it, like this is my 3rd marriage, compared to the faces when he says it, are different.
He's probably getting, man, go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, just don't get her pregnant because you don't want to pay the alimony, and like, right?
He's
like that's
probably sitting there laughing because he'll be watching this. But yeah, it's perfectly true, and
I was in the office when people would be speaking poorly about you because of this exact thing you're discussing.
How many years ago was this?
This was 15 years ago or something.
In Austria.
In Austria. And I remember getting pissed off and bringing them into
my... It was longer ago than that. It was about 20 years
Hey,
ago.
listen, let's not throw numbers on the table right now. Come on.
Okay.
I had a lot more hair then. I remember, I get emotional talking about it because it was like one of the few times in my life I called people into my office and said, guys, that this has to stop. And it was really like I couldn't understand that there was weird judgment to the idea. And this was only by the women, by the way. The
I know.
men didn't give it a thought as far as I knew, but they would actually just speak negatively, saying, oh, I don't know how many kids you had then. Four
Four.
kids from the 3 men or whatever the thing was.
2 men at that point.
2 men. Okay. Well, whatever it is, but there was that was really weird to see that there would be that. It actually, at the time, I remember it disturbed me. Very few things were disturbing to me, but like, because I was with you privately and we had our relationship, so I was now confronted with people judging someone not on merit, not on any performance, but on their private lives. It was, yeah.
Without
And the
asking questions.
situation was
No
not one
questions.
caused by me either.
No.
So I was in an even worse position because I wasn't allowed to explain it. Nobody would come to me and say, what the hell's going on? I wasn't allowed to explain it.
Can we share the details of that story on air or not?
Sure.
So
You want me to? Go
Yeah,
on.
let her do it.
You tell your story.
I feel bad to ask you to tell the story because that could be its own episode.
Yeah. You want this? Okay. My partner at the time slept with our au pair and got her pregnant and then left me for her. What? So yeah, this is why Andy said earlier, you could make it, we talked about writing a soap opera about what was going on at the time.
This was the man that was controlling her because she couldn't be trusted, by the way.
Yeah, so he took our kids away. There was another office being opened up, and he had the opportunity to take them. The au pair went to look after the kids. This was during school holidays. I stayed home to work because I had no holiday left. And yeah.
The
and
next
then
thing you
things
know,
evolved. The next thing I know,
the au pair is pregnant, and all of a sudden she's left saying, "What the hell am I supposed to do?" Crazy. And the weird thing is, in that scenario, can you imagine that you would be the one being judged?
If I was looking at that from the outside, no, of course not. But that isn't how it was portrayed.
Yeah, of course.
To the people in the office.
Yeah.
Of course it wasn't.
And that's what happens in life, is that the narrative, especially the man who is guilty, doesn't want to be seen
as being a dick,
as being that way. Chris, who happens to go to my high school, she was 2 years
and she's a
younger
lady.
than I am. What?
She's a lady.
Yes. As a female, I've had more positive dealings with men in business. With men, I stand my ground and push back when I have to. Many women I've encountered tend to not be supportive of other women in leadership. They see it as a competition. Most of the worst people I've met in my career have been women.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I can actually, I can agree with that quite a lot. There are certain people that I have worked with who, even in the same position as me, so we're total equals. Yeah, they can just be horrible. Some of them are absolutely lovely and are some of my closest friends, but no, some of them just take it that they have to have all the power, and they will be as horrible to you as they need to be to keep that. From shutting you out to asking that you work in a certain way and then not working in that way themselves. It's like, if you need to make a meeting with my people, can you do it through me? Sure, I'm happy to do that. And then suddenly you see appointments appearing in the people that you look after their calendars, and know nothing about them, or trips being booked, that you're kind of like, well, I wouldn't do this. I would say, like, this is happening, this needs to be booked, I'm more than happy to work together on it, or I'm happy to book it, but just so you know.
Yeah.
And then and that doesn't work the other way. So yeah, I completely get that. from Chris. It's to a certain extent, the same thing with authority figures,
Mm.
the people that you actually work for. There can be huge variations between men and women in that. That yes, men can sometimes come across as very condescending or yeah, not sort of not listening to you. But when women do it, they're far worse
Yeah.
in general, because they either don't do it at all or they do it in huge
Why do you
ways.
think? Why do you think that would be the case?
I think because the generation that we are, that's the way it's kind of had to be. I think women really have had to push or have felt that they've had to push
Yeah.
to be heard,
Yeah.
to be taken seriously, that they have to be this, hard-ass person to get where they want to go. Going back to your criminal attorney and the burlesque thing, why the hell shouldn't she be allowed to do both?
Yeah.
Because
And no
men
one's saying
do
anything.
all sorts of things.
No one is saying that she's not allowed, by the way. But
And I get it. It's a
it will
restriction
have
that in a way
impact.
she's putting on herself, but because of how society will view her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. It's totally wrong. That there's CEOs out there, male CEOs out there, who will go out and be riding BMX bikes or motocross or racing cars or
Strip
whatever,
clubs.
strip clubs, right?
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
bats an
Yeah.
eyelid.
The fact
It
that they
doesn't
can go
actually
to the
matter
strip
what they're
clubs.
doing.
They can go to the strip clubs. That's acceptable, but it wouldn't be acceptable for the woman to work in that strip club.
No.
I was thinking something years ago, and it came up for me in the talk, is that when I looked at like the presidential election with Hillary Clinton, like I felt like Hillary Clinton embodied a persona that men just didn't like. The woman who's strong and in authority, and like, so it was half of why I thought she lost was because the men couldn't stomach voting for the mother-in-law that they never
Yes.
really liked. So it was like it was like not even any policy. It was just this persona, which goes back to a little bit what we said. If she was a male in the same sort of character, we'd normalize it and say, oh, all politicians are plastic, or whatever the things we say.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
totally agree.
I have an interesting another interesting is that at the moment I'm coaching, I would say 80% of my clients are females in higher level executive positions. And
Okay.
there's a similar trait that comes up over and over again, is that they want to be sincere about what they are and they're not capable of doing or capable of, while their counterparts will bluff, pretend they know it when they fail doing that same thing. So
Okay.
there's this, and the fear is, hey, I don't know if I can do that role. But if I ask the question, okay, there's other people doing that well, are they succeeding? No, they're not. And then they'll know why, and they'll understand what they'll need to do to succeed. So they'll already have covered all the bases of what needs to happen. But they also feel they have to be sincere that they're not able to do that, or they're not in that moment, and they feel that they don't want to bluff. So the difference that I've found between a male that may be more comfortable and a female, which is I'm generalizing, but I'm also doing it from my experience, is that the man will often feel far more comfortable bluffing and figuring out as it goes along, where the woman will say, well, I'm not really capable of doing that. And therefore, she'll never get the same role, because in a way, if the guy says, hey, I can do that, and then even if he can't, people just want someone who says they can do it.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. But should we judge on that basis?
No, but that gets to the point, is that if we look at the subtlety of how systems form,
Hmm.
we don't even see the implicit bias. So in the way in a boardroom, if someone speaks with firm clarity, but they're speaking gibberish, that voice will often have more weight than somebody who's very soft spoken and says something very, very intelligent, but they say it with a voice that doesn't command respect.
Yeah, but when women try and talk in that authoritative voice, they're seen as being pushy.
They're judged.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, it goes on. I mean, the whole thing in the corporate world at the moment is around diversity,
Yeah.
Whether it's race, color, gender, whatever. It's all about diversity, and it's almost become so much about diversity that you don't know where to step anymore.
Yeah.
You know, um,
What do you mean by that, Juliet?
because the balance of it is almost you'll have a board of directors that is entirely male, and everybody will be up in arms. Why are there no women on your board? Would it be any better if they were all women? Would it actually be any better if it was half and half? Because surely what you should be looking at is the person who is right for that role. It doesn't matter, and that's where the whole diversity thing is in
Yeah,
itself a double standard.
but this is where it gets complicated, because follow me here. And the person who's best for that role is being defined by the current status quo of that group. So that current status quo is, hey, the people that are best are the ones that get along with us, the people that can add value, understand our cultural norms.
Yeah.
So now we invite, the man, he's a white man, but he's been on 5 boards before. He understands how we operate.
do it.
He's the right one for the group.
And he plays golf.
Yeah, possibly.
Really must take up golf.
So that's the hard thing, is how do you change from within when you're not even aware that you have those biases? Because if you ask those people, what do you think the first thing they're going to say is? I've got a black friend.
I've got a female friend.
Yeah. I mean,
Really? She's really a friend? Is she actually a friend? Or do you just fancy her and but you have her as your friend because?
That's another episode, though. But I mean, no, but in all seriousness, is that the standards, the status quo is defining how it proceeds. And that's why the Me Too movements and the Black Lives Matter movements and the LGBTQ, everyone has a very, very good point to be made.
Absolutely.
And the sad thing is that we're not in an environment where we're trying to learn from one another. And just to make just because I want to make sure that I get my one black friend on.
Andy
Rob Cooper
had black friends.
is my one black friend.
We had his papa.
Rob.
We had Rob. Thank you. Rob was also part of our working group together. Yeah. We had Rob's dad on. If you have not seen that episode,
it's brilliant. I loved it. I sat and watched it.
Absolutely
fantastic.
Incredible. And to be honest, I think the only thing I said on that show that was totally offensive was that Rob was whiter than I am. So
is that why he's your friend?
He is so well spoken. You know what I mean? Like when I talk to Rob, I think, oh my God, I really don't I use like 20% of the English language, like if he had an SAT,
Me too.
Like I'm only aware of it when I see somebody who actually has a lot more in the engine than I've got. Right. Yeah. Funny.
Rob, have you written any books we could read?
No, he just reads his dad's, I'm guessing. And we also have Peter Taylor on, who has
laughing my freaking ass off.
He's the lazy project manager. I you know what? I have jokes that I'm gonna not say. I'm not gonna say them.
You know him?
I do know him. We had him on the show.
Fiance.
Oh,
that's his fiance. See, doesn't he look like me? Take a look at his face.
Oh my God.
Look at his face. Is that me?
No, that's more good looking.
He's better looking, of course.
Yeah, see? Exactly.
Rob says, okay, so we're having too much fun now. What do you want to ask, Bob?
Well, like as a man and doing this show, I do notice there's a part of me that wants to feels protective towards women.
Mm.
Also, the woman that I'm dating right now, she came out of a relationship where for 5 years she she was kind of a prisoner in a way that she couldn't express, she couldn't dress in a certain way, she couldn't have
In there.
Facebook. Messenger was being controlled, and the whole time the guy was cheating on her.
Ugh.
Hmm.
And it took a long time for her to step out of it and just say no. I'm
Mm.
no longer gonna say yes to this kind of behavior.
Mm.
Well done, her.
Yeah.
Well done, her. Yeah.
Well done, her. So much respect for that. It's incredibly difficult because you come to believe the things that you are told. We hear it. We hear in positive coaching, that reinforcement, positive reinforcement all the time. If you're getting negative reinforcement, that's what you believe. And
Yeah.
it's very, very difficult to step outside of it and go, no, this isn't me. That's not what I deserve. That's not what I'm worth. I'm
Mm.
worth more than this. Um, so
It's
yeah.
interesting because the way you've said it, we discussed it even a bit in your life when we were discussing your journey.
Yeah.
That there's an interesting point where their society clearly is conditioning us, men and women, to have certain beliefs about ourselves. If nothing more than we give the young boy a science set and we give the young woman a doll, right? Just the whole way we're priming the brain to move in certain directions. And if I look at it, like what we're saying is that at some point your current girlfriend, have an opportunity to go, hold on, but I haven't thought about what I want in this scenario yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that takes something massive, and other times it's just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a big major event, like the au pair being pregnant. And
Yeah.
other times it's just an accumulation over time where you suddenly go, no,
I
enough.
can't breathe.
I can't breathe. I can't do
Yeah.
this. I cannot continue to be supportive of someone who has absolutely no respect for anything that I say or do. Um, so
One of the
there are many different ways to it, and some people never get out.
it points at something that I wrote down earlier on, is that I see that people pleasing is this characteristic which makes someone a fantastic personal assistant.
Hmm.
What do you guys? There was no punchline to a joke on this. I don't know.
No, but it is funny.
Oh, okay, good. But because I like looking at behavior discreetly, but it doesn't serve the individual. So
No.
it makes them very, very good in the role, because in that way they're anticipating, they're trying to support and be helpful. But what I've also seen is that it doesn't necessarily lead to advancement.
No, it doesn't. No, and the other thing is making sure that you keep that separate, that work life mentality, if you like, separate. That yes, in work, you kind of do as they say, and you anticipate needs, and come up with suggestions for things they might not have thought about because they're not at that level.
Yeah.
And you do all of that. If you do that at home too much, you become not you,
Yeah.
because there's no
Become not you.
balance.
Yeah.
And as someone who's done that, and I've never been the quiet, meek, yes dear, no dear person. I would, to a certain extent, stand up, fight
Yeah.
back, but not enough. I never went, no, this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in your case, I'm assuming you had children,
Hmm.
and when you have children, there's consequences if you do that.
Yeah, yeah. And so a lot of it was based in fear.
Yeah.
What if I say no, enough, if I say I'm leaving, if I try and kick him out. All of those things become a barrier to actually standing up for anything,
Hmm.
because the other worry is that you say no and they go, well, then I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And quite where all these were, well, I know where some of them are, but all these women who manage to leave a relationship and end up with the house and the cars and the money and that's never been me. I end up with the children, which is
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
In some cases, not all cases, they went for a while.
I think you're in the
Um,
wrong state then.
Yeah. You didn't pick the men well.
no,
Yeah,
third time lucky, right?
you did get third time lucky for sure.
Julia, how like if you think of your life and a way of working, I'm assuming that you needed to work 10 times more hard. I'm just giving a number now than a man in the same position to get to where you are today. It's an
Hmm,
assumption.
I, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I think that if I had been male, I would have got further than I have.
Mhm.
I mean, the role that I'm in now, I was very lucky. When I made that last decision to kind of make a break, do it by myself, I got an interview, and I actually got the job because I told one of the senior leadership team that I have 5 children, and so I'm used to herding cats, and that is what looking after a team like that can be like,
Yeah.
because you're not just looking after one person. In my role, you're looking after multiple people, and they all work completely different ways. So some days it really is like herding cats. So I was very lucky in the person that interviewed me.
I'm surprised it
Very
didn't work
lucky.
against you actually, because if you have 5 children, oh, you're busy with your children. So what makes you think you can
Mhm.
do 10 people?
To be fair, um, 3 of them at that point were grown up. Only 2 of them were still at home.
Okay.
So, and that came into the conversation. I've got 2 still at home. They're like 12 and 15 or whatever they were at the time. And, and then I have 3 grown up children. But so,
Y-
would I have to work harder? I don't know. I mean, my role is I'm as high up as I can go in 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 the company that I'm in.
Mm.
That's it. There's nowhere for me to go, because there's no sideways move that is covered in what I do. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, but I also see that, and I think might be where people like. I remember I was working when we worked at. I'll leave people nameless. I worked next to a guy who was very ineffective in his leadership, and he
Mhm.
had underneath him an incredibly smart, engaged, capable individual who was unbelievably effective, like in ways I was shocked. So I said, here's an annual report. I did this last year. Do you think you could take this on? Oh, sure, I could do the annual report. So she'd write out an annual report. But she was working for this individual who didn't like help her or support her. And the
Mhm.
reason why I share it back to you at this moment is I also believe that it takes an individual to see the capacity and say, let's get you in another role.
Mhm.
And I believe that is part of this implicit bias where people will look at more the men and say, hey, I think that you could probably do something far greater than this, instead of, hey, let's not rock the boat. If she's happy and she's content, let's just keep her there. I think that happens so subtly, we're not even processing how it happens.
Yeah. No, no,
Yeah.
no, I think you're right, but I think that also happens with different departments. For a role like mine, we kind of have to know a
Yeah.
lot of what goes on, and how things work. So you will get people in other departments who are asked by their managers, "How do we do this?" "I don't know. I'll find out for you." And they go back
Yeah.
with that information. We don't,
Yeah.
we don't get the credit for it.
Yeah.
EAs don't get the credit for stuff like that, because it's just implied that we should know,
Yeah.
and that's part of our job role. So if somebody said, "Oh, Juliet's been really helpful," da 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 da, you know, uh, everyone would go, "Well, yeah, that's her role."
Yeah.
And that's, in some ways that's great. But in some ways, it's
Is not
like,
seen
well,
as a superpower.
Yeah.
yeah, it is definitely not seen as a superpower.
If I reverse it back to my life, when I met Juliet, I was put in a role that I was wholly unqualified for. Like,
Yeah, you
You
talk
got
about it in your book.
yourself in that role, Andy.
I don't know if I got it. I had your former husband, and you sitting around beer saying, "Andy, why not? You can figure." But but the fact that I was even considered for it and given the role was almost again speaking to the fact that they trusted me. And I would suggest if I was a black female, I would not have been given that role.
No.
No.
But that was kind of the culture of that company. I mean, if you look at, there was the incident of one of the sales guys who'd been trying to get hold of someone at one of the really big banks. And I had said to him, I know him really well because I used to speak to him on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Do you want me to send him an email or get in contact with him for you? Well, he's not, he's not answering my calls. Why would he answer yours? Those were the exact words that came out of his mouth. And about, 3 months later, I was talking to the guy at the bank again, and that sales guy happened to walk past. And I said, "Can you just hold on a sec?" And I put the guy on hold and was like, "Have you spoken to this guy yet?" And he's like, "No." Went back on the call. "Hi, da da da, um, really great to catch up with you. By the way, so and so's been trying to catch up with you. Could you would you mind speaking to him now? I can transfer you through." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, Juliet, no problem." Put him through to the guy. The guy never came back and thanked me.
Yeah.
But he would never have got through to that guy without my relationship.
Yeah.
I have
Maybe
one
on
word:
a.
entitlement.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was sales. He was sales. So he knew,
Yeah.
there was no way that a secretary was going to get to speak to, because this guy was quite high up in the department that they needed. But
Yeah.
I spoke to a lot of those people.
Yeah. But that was a pretty unhealthy culture. I also want to make clear that culture that you were in at that time was not a very healthy one.
No, it wasn't. But it speaks to the fact that there is that, whether it's male, female, or you know, in a hierarchical position,
Yeah.
that sometimes people will talk down to you because of your
Yeah.
position, when actually you are in a far better place
Yeah.
to get them the
To get
result
the
that they
So
want.
they're not showing you the respect, and obviously they don't get the benefit. It's funny because Rob Cooper, who says recognition is actually important. It's interesting because when I worked, I always hired older people who were far more intelligent than I was to work in my departments. I don't know if you like. I was the manager, but I don't know if you realize I was the youngest one in my own department. I was always hiring people older, more experienced, and the
Why not?
only thing I felt like I became was how do I like channel it so that it's acceptable by whoever I needed to sell an idea on, or whatever the thing that was going to be done. But it's interesting because, and I also would see that I was always, to be honest with you, I liked working with females more than males in general, because I saw that the ego issues were less.
Hmm.
There didn't need to be right. There was more like, how can we make it work? So I noticed that was far more of, and I think just by my nature, I don't want to be right. I want to see how can we make it work. And
Yeah,
so
you make it work.
I try to find people that are more in that sort of, I don't know, that mindset. So
Hmm.
thank you, Rob. I learned a lot from you. I actually find myself becoming much more like Rob the older I get. I used to fight the culture of our former company, and Rob would always get me so angry. He'd say, Andy, that's just how businesses work. And I
Hmm.
would want to kill him. I would
Yeah.
want to kill him because I said, if I have to accept this, then I have to leave. And funny thing was, I left that company. I never went to work for another company again because I learned that this is how businesses work. So
Yeah.
thank you, Rob, for teaching me a big lesson in life. Yes. We've gone over our hour, and it was really great to be with you.
And you. Thank you for having me on.
I know it means a lot to Andy that you've been on.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me that Andy had faith to have me on
Yeah.
here,
Both
because I don't
sides, by the
do
way.
like this kind of thing.
Both sides, because we could reveal enough about it's like when they talked about mutually assured destruction. We both have the nuclear codes for one another's lives, so we could easily have destroyed one another and not played nice.
No, we always played nice, Andy. We've always played nice.
I love you. We'll
Okay,
talk.
Juliet.
I love
Yes.
you too. Take care, guys.
And,
See you
and good
soon.
luck with the marriage.
Thank
I
you.
won't be there, obviously, but I will enjoy the
Just
pictures.
like I wasn't at yours.
Exactly. Exactly. So just to clear this one up, Bambas, before we leave, when she separated from her former husband, I was in many ways having a closer relationship with him. So he was invited and Juliet wasn't. And I called her to discuss it.
I remember you told me this.
And yet she still holds a grudge. So she didn't invite me to her wedding either. So I'll have to live with that. I love you.
Love you too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You're such a dick.
Yeah, you see how we've gone through some really tough times together that bonds you to somebody forever. Yeah.
I really like Peter's profile.
Yeah. Peter.
The lazy project. I love you, Peter.
Peter's got one of the most sold project management books called The Lazy Project Manager. I think he's given it away for a long time, or he's made it really inexpensive. So if you haven't seen the episode, that was also a very good episode.
Just type his name in.
Yes.
Peter Taylor, a wonderful chaos.
The Lazy Project Manager, the wonderful chaos. Sweet, man. We don't have a guest for tomorrow yet.
Oh.
So
between today and tomorrow, send us a message on our Facebook page, A Wonderful Chaos, to let us know if you want to be on our show. Give us a reason.
Exactly.
Why?
Give us a reason why. We want to have a good show. We're not just getting any scrangler off the road to do the show with us tomorrow. So give us a good show idea. We'd love to have you on. Otherwise, we'll figure something out as we do. Because what are we, Bambos?
We can bring my mom on. If we can get it to work on.
I would. Hey, listen, your mom is it. If you can get your mom, we have your mom.
Are you serious?
Obviously. You kidding me?
Let me see.
An hour with your mom? We have you. See you tomorrow, possibly with Bambos' mom on.
Wonderful Chaos.
Wonderful Chaos.